You ready? Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for coming to the Evanston History Center. It's nice to see you all here. My name is Krista. I'm the Director of Public Engagement. I'm happy to welcome you here. Is there anybody who this is your first time at the Evanston History Center? Oh, yeah, a couple people. Welcome, welcome. And I also, in terms of welcoming, I wanted to give a special welcome and a thank you to our board members. I know we have several board members in the house tonight, so we appreciate your support as always. Thank you. The Evanston History Center is grateful to be in this historic house, which was the home of Charles Dawes, who is the former Vice President of the United States under Calvin Coolidge. He was actually inaugurated exactly 100 years ago, this March 4th. And most of you have been here before, so you probably know this, but if you're interested in learning more about the house and about Charles Dawes, we do house tours Thursday through Sunday from 1 to 4. We also recognize that the land this house is on has a rich history that goes back way farther than Charles Dawes. This home stands on the unceded ancestral lands of the Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, and the Odawa peoples. We honor this history, and we remember it as we use this house. Additionally, we recognize the privilege inherent in the wealth of this house, its previous owner, this beautiful lakefront property, and how that relates to whose stories are preserved and told, or conversely, erased from history due to colonialism and racism that continues to this day. At the Evanston History Center, even though we're based in the home of one prominent Evastonian, we're committed to honoring and highlighting the stories of all of the people of Evanston, past and present. We take seriously our role in making sure different stories and perspectives are valued, and through exploration and dialogue, we all continue learning. So in that spirit of exploration and dialogue and continued learning, I'm really excited to introduce to you our three panelists for this evening, our speakers for this evening. First of all, we're going to have Jeffrey Garrett is with us. Jeffrey is the Adult Services Librarian at the Evanston Public Library, and he's formerly the Associate University Librarian for Special Libraries at Northwestern University. Welcome, Jeff. And I know Jeff was really instrumental. I'm sure he'll talk about it more, and put a lot of years and time and effort to make sure this project went forward. So we're really appreciative for that. We also have with us Dino Robinson. Welcome, Dino. Dino is the founder of Shorefront Legacy Center. He is also an author, speaker, and a consultant on community-based archiving, organizing, and programming. Thanks for being here. And finally, we have Grace Leader, who is our in-house wonderful archivist at the Evanston History Center. If you come to the research room downstairs, often you'll find Grace, and she is very helpful there. Jeff and Dino and Grace are going to be telling you, of course, about a wonderful and incredibly useful community resource, the Evanston Public Library's digitized historical newspaper archive. You'll learn about the project, how it came about, what it offers, and really interesting ways that all of us can use it, both individually, for organizations, in fun and creative ways. So before we start, just a couple, logistical announcements. There's a bathroom over around the bend to the left. Our program will run about 60 minutes. I think the presentation will be about 45 minutes. And we'd love to get your questions, and answer your questions afterwards. So if you have questions, please save those for the end. We are streaming this on Facebook Live. Hello to anybody who's watching us live on Facebook. And we will also have the recording available. We'll send it out to you, and it will be on our website afterwards. And finally, we're so pleased to offer these free programs to make them available to the community. We're also, always interested in fundraising. So if you're not a member yet, there's information up at the front about our membership program, and also how you can donate to the Evanston History Center. There's a QR at the code in the front, and there is always our evanstonhistorycenter.org website. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, to see you, and we hope to see you again. There's also flyers in the front about some of our upcoming programs. And of course, our email list is always a way to stay informed about everything that we're doing. So let's get it started. I'm going to hand it over to Jeffrey.
So can the virtual audience hear me? Mm-hmm. Good. And I think over here, I'm going to have to bring the microphone over because of a short cable in a moment. Also, is this on?
Yeah, do you want to sit and then I can set up the mic?
Well, I thought people would like to see my face and then not see it for the rest of the program. So, thank you for inviting me this evening. I'm very happy to be here. I am thoroughly delighted to see so many friends and former coworkers and even family members. My wife Nina is here, a bookstore owner, one of many in Evanston. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to move there, and so we're going to have to readjust the microphone. But the point I'd like to start with is that towns and cities, just like individuals, have a memory of their past, or they don't. Individuals who lose their memory are said to have amnesia. Towns and cities like Evanston, the lack of memory comes from a lack of good libraries, a lack of good institutions like this one, and the lack of a readily accessible archive that they can call up from wherever they are and whenever they want to. In other words, if you want to know something about Evanston history, frequently you want to come to a place like the research library in the basement here or to the library, but wouldn't it be great if you had access to 152 years of newspaper content instantly accessible from wherever you happen to be, including on a beach, including in Paris. Your passport is actually your library card. And it's funny, I feel like I'm repeating a speech that I heard when I was 5. But it's really true. This is a remarkable archive that we're going to be introducing to you this evening. And it even goes up to the very present day. In other words, it's an archive, but it has the 3 of the 4 Evanston news sources loaded on the day of their publication, fully indexed and searchable. And I'm going to be showing this to you in a moment. So we're going to relocate. Remember this face, you're not going to see it again. Okay, can you hear me? So let me start by showing you 2 ways to get into this memory site. One is from our glorious new webpage at Evanston Public Library, where, let's see, we have a mouse, that's good. You do not want to search the catalog for this, you want to search the website. So you just open this and choose the website. You want to search all content, and you want to search Evanston newspapers.
A little closer.
A little closer.
There.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe if you hold it a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Of course, the other way to get to it is to Google it. And Google sometimes good if you can't remember the URL for the library. So if you type in Evanston Library History Resources, you will get this screen. And what we all want then is to click on the Evanston History Resources. That takes you here. You have 3 options: Evanston History Resources, which is what we want; Evanston History Centers, which provides you with links to institutions like the Evanston History Center, Shorefront Legacy, and others. And then if you want to learn something about library history, there's the 3rd option, but this is the option that we want. And you can choose any of the archived, of the digitally accessible newspapers, but I'm going to start by searching across all Evanston newspapers from 1872 to present. This is not all Evanston newspapers. Are all the newspapers that we have. But this is a growing project, and I hope very much that within a couple of years, the content that we can offer will be substantially more. But already now, you can see, if you just press that first link, there is a list of the 12 newspapers that we have. It's pretty darn impressive. And first of all, we have the entire Evanston Review, which was, the news source of record for 100 years. It says here through 2009. That is the historical archive file. What that means is that it includes everything, as opposed to the current file, which starts in 1995, which is only articles. Well, you might ask, why would I want anything else than articles? Well, you'll see the difference that an historical archive makes. And then all these other newspapers, the oldest goes back to 1872, the Evanston Index. We have 3 African-American news sources, CCC Newsette, Afro Newsette, and then the Evanston Newsette that goes back to 1941. So this is pretty impressive. All in all, this is an enormous amount of content from and about Evanston's past. Millions of pages, each one of them scanned and made available, billions of words. 5,000 plus issues of the Evanston Review alone. Sadly, one issue is missing. You want to guess which one? No, it's June 2nd, 1969. And we even got some support from the Evanston RoundTable. They said, people, it's just about complete. Ransack your attics and see if you have this one issue, but we don't. And why is this important? Since so much else is there, we can never say that something that people are looking for and not finding is not in the June 2nd, 1969 issue. It's amazing. It must have been a 400-page issue, but it now provides mainly an excuse for us. So in the historical archives, all picture captions, all classified ads. Back in the day, the Evanston Review in the 80s, for example, would have 10, 15, even 20 pages of classified ads in very fine type. That's all been digitized. It's all searchable. All boxed ads have been captured, and every single word is indexed and searchable. So on the other side of the spectrum is what I mentioned before, that current issues of Evanston RoundTable, Evanston Review, and Evanston Now are posted and searchable the day of publication. I just saw the February 17th issue of one of these. So these are 3 of the 4 principal news sources for current news in Evanston. We're not going to mention what the 4th is. Oh, well, we are, but later. So the whole database is searchable all at once by individual publication across multiple publications. In other words, you can create your own subcorpus and within a date range that you can designate. And that helps if your search terms are particularly common and you want to limit the size of your retrieval set. Results are printable, emailable, scalable, and God darn it, frameable. You can use this from home or from anywhere in the world with an EPL library card. And to make this even more valuable, there is a certain exclusivity to it. There are no other ways to get in. There would be ways if like Skokie or Chicago were to get licensed access to this, but to the best of my knowledge, no one else has it. I had a phone call once from the dean of the School of Design at Harvard. She was looking into, what was it? There was an architecture bureau in Evanston called Perkins and something else. Yeah. And so she wanted to search the database. I said, no, you have to let me do it. And she said, well, how could I acquire access to this database? And I said, you need to talk to Newsbank, our partner in that. I don't know if Harvard has access or whether, they want to rely on our reference desk. This project was not done by the library alone. So I want to acknowledge the other project partners. It's a pretty long list. Evanston Public Library was kind of the lead on this, and I want to acknowledge Heather Norborg, my boss at the time, who provided the political know-how and clout to get this through the board. And I want to acknowledge the board. The board approved a very large appropriation unanimously to get this done, and that speaks for the board. So we have a payment plan over 6 years, but we will have access to this database forever. Our commercial partner was Newsbank in Naples, Florida. Dan Jones, the founder and president, is an NU alum. And I got to know him when I was at Northwestern. And he gave the digitization of that other paper, the Daily Northwestern, to Northwestern as a gift. One result of that is that he is a trustee for life at Northwestern University. He instructed his second in command, Chuck Palshow, to negotiate with Tribune Media for the rights to digitize this. Tribune Media, you may remember, the Tribune purchased Pioneer Press, and they own the rights to the Evanston Review, also historically. And so this negotiation took place in Ann Arbor. I understand it was difficult, but it worked, and we wouldn't have been able to do the project otherwise. Evanston History Center, a shout out to Grace Lehner, who not only located some resources that we did not have that we wanted to digitize, but also foolishly perhaps gave us permission to take some of the archive and pack it up and send it to El Paso, Texas, which is where the digitization center is, or I've been told was, for Newsbank. And did you get everything back?
Yes, I did.
Okay. If you didn't, let me know later. And then Shorefront Legacy Center. Dino, I mean, we couldn't have done anything with the Newsette, the 3 different versions of Newsette, without his intercession. He knows the family of Melvin Smith, the founder and the longtime editor of the Newsette. And above all, he also knows the niece of Melvin Smith, who asserted copyright as the inheritor of that right from Melvin Smith, and wrote a wonderful letter to assert that copyright and make sure that we wouldn't have problems digitizing copyrighted material. So, thank you. Northwestern University Library, Kevin Leonard, Carolyn Casey, Peter Birch. Kevin is the archivist at Northwestern, you may know him. A true champion of this, as he was a champion of digitizing the Daily Northwestern. Carolyn Casey, who has since moved to that Northwestern of the East. What's its name again? Harvard. She was head of the digitization operation at Northwestern and digitized a couple of issues to such a high standard that Newsbank couldn't work with them. They had to dumb them down. You may know that Northwestern owns 7 Beatles manuscripts that are framed. They're not framed. Copies are framed in the Deering Library. The copies actually look more genuine than the originals. They also seem to be in 3 dimensions. That's how heavily detailed their scans were. And Peter Birch also helped with microfilm and locating newspapers that we needed. And then a strange partner, strange only because you wouldn't expect it, the Abraham Lincoln Memorial Library and Museum in Springfield. It turns out that many libraries in the state had their microfilming done by the Abraham Lincoln Library. And they kept all the masters. And so we had a number of microfilm reels that had, let's say, been misplaced over the years. And they wouldn't give us the master copies, but they would help us create service copies. And that company was Backstage Library Works in Provo, Utah. So this was a project with very many moving parts and many opportunities for failure. If we had not gotten these rights, we wouldn't have this today. What it replaced, I almost don't want to show you these. Stacks of yellowing newsprint, whole volumes of crumbling newsprint from the early 20th and late 19th century. In many cases, these newspapers had to be thrown away the moment they had been digitized. In the library field, that's called destructive preservation, which is almost as nonsensical as many things we're hearing in politics today. But we had one last chance to preserve them, and we used that chance. And then all this microfilm. Now, the gaps you see here are not the gaps I was talking about earlier. I don't know what they are, but several thousand reels of microfilm were also digitized. So if you have a lot of stuff, which we did in physical form, you have to have some way to access the content. We had a card file, which is 19th century technology, and people went through the Evanston Review and created an indexing system. Here you can see, and this was they did this about 30 years of 100 years of content. Index terms used were just a very small percentage of all possible topics. You can see Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. This is card 2. But take a look at this first one. Jackie Taylor, age 12, a feature on her. What if you're Jackie Taylor's mom and you want to see that, find that article at the library? Well, Jackie Taylor is not indexed. So it's a pretty random system. Above all, it has no random access. You can't search by keyword. And above all, Evanston's African American newspapers were not indexed. I'm right about that, aren't I?
There was an opportunity at one point, but the entire indexing was lost.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what's worse, not doing it in the first place or doing it and losing it. The obituary file, the nightmare of every librarian, because you have to run back and forth from the obituary file that you see here in the lower left to the paper or the microfilm referenced in that file, and then proceed to figure out a family history based on, here for example, Charlie Lane's, 2 of his sons preceded him in death, Wade and Charles Davis. I think, Dino, you're going to talk about the difference in obituaries between the Evanston Review and the News-Ed?
I'm going to compare this.
Got it. And then we have a clippings file. We had a second copy of the Evanston Review that was cut up and assigned to a folder. And I've always wondered, if you have one second copy of the Evanston Review and you have 2 interesting articles on either side of the same piece of paper, which one do you choose? Not our problem anymore. And then there was an online index that you see here that was searchable. There was one copy of it on a computer at the reference desk. This was not accessible, the index was not accessible to patrons. Individual files were often misfiled or stolen. Let's just say misfiled. Or individual items in these files may be removed and not put back, or at least not that we could find them. So no security. This still happens today, but all of these things are still available to users as a backup research method. The very worst case scenario, with the old system, you spend hours searching for something. For example, one question that came was a fatal car accident on Sheridan Road sometime in 1935 mentioned in the Evanston Review. Well, how do you find that? This is not going to be indexed. So you're going to be going through, hundreds of pages of text, either in the bound volumes or in microfilm, and then you might still not find something. I had this actually as a reference question, and I will honestly say I didn't look at the entire Evanston Review. I did call Kevin Leonard at NU Archives thinking that Sheridan Road goes past Northwestern, and maybe that's where it occurred. He didn't know of any fatal car accidents on Sheridan Road in front of Northwestern in 1935, and I don't blame him. So look at all this stuff that we now have accessible. We can, if we're interested in the Orrington chocolate shop, which no one has ever been. the Orrington chocolate shop is turned up by the online indexing. Anything in yellow has been digitized and is searchable, is referenced. The classifieds, incredible amounts of content. Is it useless? I'm going to prove in a moment that it's not. And how about Sibylle Mittelsdorf, a colleague of ours at Northwestern? Well, when she was a sophomore at ETHS, she won a $500 award because she won some French language contest to go to Dijon, France. She didn't know about this. When I asked her, I mean, she didn't know that there was an article about it, and so I sent it to her. Here's a problem. Look down below. This is from our database. In other words, it picks up the image just like all the text. It did pick up her name and the text, and it delivered the image as well. You wouldn't want to use this in a book. You would want to use this because it's the best you're going to find. So it's always a good idea to keep your paper archive. Even if it's not being used much, put it in storage, but have it there if someone wants a better print of a photograph. So our database was premiered on October 10th, 2023, about a year and a half ago. And we invited the community in also to try the database. And this is Jeff Doman. He said he was having problems proving to his grandchildren that he actually ever played basketball. And so we found him. Many references, a 24-point production by Jeff Doman. And he played for a team called the Unknowns. Well, unknowns no more. And we did a lot of things like this just to show how this could be useful. And here's Dino, our next speaker, who introduced Cheryl Collins, Melvin Smith's grandniece, who, is she a librarian?
She's a retired librarian.
Retired librarian. She didn't need any instruction in why this was useful. So what a great coincidence and what a great ally. I'm not going to mention Rich Kahan at all. So a couple brief demonstrations before I depart. Property and small business research in the new digital environment. That's the house I grew up in Northwest Evanston in the last century, millennium. And so I had a reference question for myself. I grew up at 2805 Thayer Street in Evanston. Jeff, what can you tell me about my old house? So we do a search of 2805 Thayer in the database across all 12 newspapers, and we get 64 hits between 1912 and 1991. What happened after 1991 that there wouldn't be more real estate ads? This thing called, I think it's called the web. And so the usefulness for looking for real estate starting in 1990s is today very, very limited. Here you can see the distribution. The first mention was in the 1910s. Most distributions, that would be maybe 1970s. And then it slacked off again. You can see here the highlighted address that was a full page ad from Baird and Warner. And here is the announcement of an open house in the May 9th, 1991 Evanston Review. Of course, none of the hits were from African American newspapers, this being Northwest Evanston. Many boxed or classified ads with incredible descriptions of the house, paneled basement, which I remember my dad doing, and which today would rank as incredibly ugly. Other hits are articles about previous owners. Now, I have to tell you something about the old Evanston Review if you're not aware of it. It had a social page. So if Mrs. Walter Smith invited her next door neighbor to tea, that was covered and with the address. And so you can find out about the daily lives of people who lived in a house before you did. So there's a lot of detail concerning the yard, the interior, the furnishings, and frequently also the price is asked. Of course, in any real estate ad, always. Another fairly typical question, When my mother came to Northwestern as a student around 1945, this, by the way, is also my mother. I'm sorry. But we get these questions all the time. I was especially motivated, though, to look this one up. So she worked at, when she was a student at Northwestern, part-time for a florist downtown, which I believe was Seville Flowers on Sherman. What can you tell me about that place? And so I say to myself, I'm so sorry. The first mention we find of Seville Flowers is in our newspapers database of 1957. Can you be off by a few years? And I reply, no. So I do a search for the name Seville, and I found out that Don Seville worked at London's flower shop before acquiring it in the late 40s. I say, oh, that's me questioning, whether this librarian knows what he's doing. But finally, I say to myself, yes, that's where she worked, with Don Seville. So this is the power of this database. You could never do this in paper. So I'm going to speed to my conclusion. My grand hope for this project is that we have a cross-platform discovery and current and recent content platform. What does that mean? It means now we have Evanston Review, Evanston Now, and as of a couple of months ago, the Evanston RoundTable. And thanks to Mark Miller of the RoundTable for championing this and seeing it through to a conclusion. What we don't have is what they say in their masthead, Evanston's only daily news source since 1881, which it's not anymore. But not having this is grievous because it has a lot of information going way back. Let's not forget that Frances Willard was a dean at Northwestern, and she was very well covered. So my suggestion is that we sue the Daily Northwestern for false information in their masthead, forcing them to give us permission to load this into our database. Just an example, the debate about the stadium. This is the way it looks now. If we do a search for Ryan Field new stadium, we get 184 hits. The first one's from Evanston Now from November 4th, 2022. On the same day, there's an article by Bob Seidenberg at the Evanston RoundTable, and then a couple days later, the Evanston Review. So you can do a complete chronology of any story you want to. You can also check out the qualifications of the current mayoral candidates. But what we are still missing is all of this content from the Daily Northwestern. I'm also hoping that we can be used, this database can be used for research assignments at the high school and maybe even at the middle schools. For example, choose a year in the life of Frances Willard and tell us what she did. Speeches, travels, guests. She was very well covered in the review and in the index and the news index. And it would be interesting, and this will make sense once you've heard Dino's talk, describe the founding of Evanston's Emerson Street YMCA. You quickly discover that there are certain research issues that Dino's going to talk about. Or how successful were Evanston High School sports teams in 1925. Caveats, there be gaps. Quite a few gaps, missing pages, individuals, whole years, or even whole publications. We're working on that. Some of the pages, inevitably those made from microfilm, are less than 100% readable. Might be nice if we could redo those, but we probably won't be able to anytime soon. The scanning software then has difficulties reading. It tries to. In an 1882 issue of the Index, it uses the word pianoist. Our software couldn't read that, and so it reads pianola, leading to false drops. Photograph quality we've talked about. It's bad, but that's why you keep the paper as long as you can. So we sometimes get requests from patrons saying, could you correct the typo on page 22 of this 1920? We cannot. This was an industrial process. Millions and millions of pages. So, suck it up. Sorry to say. But again, for the third or fourth time, do not discard the paper originals. Our blue sky then, once we've paid for what we have, let's find the money to digitize new content. Add the paper-only content of the Evanston RoundTable, 1995 to 2006, now stored in the Gavin's home, I think.
One copy there and one copy at the office.
Okay. Oh my God, where did this come from? Okay. Stop the presses. We can't do it because the Evanston RoundTable doesn't have the copyright to the Evanston RoundTable content. The individual contributors do. So we've been talking, haven't we, about getting releases from all the people who published stories in 2006 and earlier. It's going to be a bear. And then add the Daily Northwestern and complete my pet project, the Current Events Clearinghouse. We'd also get a lot of content from 150 years, spend time demonstrating the database in schools, churches, synagogues, and places like this. I think Grace and Dino could probably rent a van and just go from one to the other. And that's really all I've got. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Dino now.
So it'll be about a minute to do a switch over.
Oh.
There we go. Okay. Wonderful technology. Hi, my name is Dino Robinson, in case you don't know who I am. I'm going to kind of demonstrate how I utilized a digital collection in this newspaper with a work that I'm doing right now, updating a book I produced in 2004 called Gatherings. So again, as Jeff said earlier, you're going to see my face for the rest of the evening until the end to make this as easy as possible. So some time ago, there we go, I started work with early shorefront work of researching a very specific subject, and that was of the Emerson Street YMCA. And that stemmed from a series of oral histories that I was looking into to gather local history. Actually, this will be easier. There we go. And some of the things when I was looking through archives here at the Evanston History Center, in family homes, were brochures and pulling information from newspaper clippings. And as Jeff was talking about earlier, looking through newspapers, hundreds of newspapers, to try and find any information was virtually impossible. Now, this book that I did in 2004 was supported by a grant, but I had 6 months to complete a publication and to do research and kind of run in and out of places at the open hours in the library to see what was available, going through some newspaper clippings, the clipping files here at the Evanston History Center, going through the oral histories that I've had, was quite daunting, but I did produce something. And it was well, but as soon as it was produced, I knew I wanted to improve on it. And in 2004, it wasn't the right time and right place. I had a full-time job. I had a small family. I had a family. I had a small daughter that took up a lot of my time. And how can I do this on the side while handling life? Thankfully, when Jeff approached about digitizing, this was a period where I had like a downtime, COVID hit. I was reigniting the interest of updating this publication, and it seemed like to fall in the right time in the right place. And the turnaround was relatively quick, really only from the time we spoke to having the files available was about 2 years. At the same time, I have to say that the Kautz family archives at the University of Minneapolis, they hold the holdings of the national and global YMCA archives. And they too, during COVID, digitized the colored works department of the Emerson Street YMCA. So two things kind of fell in place at the same time, which made researching so much easier. So these digital collections open the doors to more access to information. What I also found, though, there was a disparity in that as well that played itself out with this digital research. So I'll kind of go through this one really quick. What I started doing when I was researching with the newly installed Newsbank database at the Evanston Public Library was developing a list of search terms to look through these newspapers, thousands of pages, to find information about the Emerson Street Branch YMCA. To put back in context, I was individually going to these repositories and leafing through papers, learning how to speed read and speed scan through papers, looking for key things that might pop out. Then imagine doing that on microfilm as well. Scrolling through, zooming in, zooming out, hopefully you can read all this stuff. You only had so many hours in a day to do so. But in doing this, I could play around with different key search terms and within seconds find hundreds of hits across newspapers. So I did an experiment for this presentation just to see what would come up. And I did a comparison between two newspapers, the Evanston Review, which has been around for quite some time, and the Evanston Newsette, an African-American paper here in Evanston. And the time period was between 1940 and 1959. And I did a search term with Emerson YMCA without quotes and Emerson YMCA with quotes. And those will produce two different results. Without the quotes, you'll get searches for Emerson and YMCA separately. With the quotes, you get the term Emerson YMCA as a more succinct search. So with Evanston Review, it resulted without quotes, 108 hits. With quotes, 6 hits. And that was a 19-year period between 1940 and 1959. Now, I did the same search with the Evanston Newsette. 345 hits without quotes and 42 hits with quotes in a 9-year period, because this paper only went from 1941 to like 1952, I believe. So that disparity there was really interesting. Now, with the same time period with Evanston Review of 9 years, was only 45 hits without quotes and 1 hit with the quotes. So already, if you're just casually researching, and if the Evanston Newsette was not digitized in this collection, we're talking about access, availability, and discoverability. With these disparate newspapers that are not digitized properly, you only have one access to the written word. And, you know, the importance of communities owning their narrative and getting it out there is extremely important. What's missed? Who's telling the story? Who gets to tell the story? And how is it explained? So with that, you know, with the search, you can see here, Jeff kind of demonstrated that earlier with the Evanston Review, 56 results in this match with Emerson YMCA in quotes. You can see how it calls up between this period of 1940 to 1969. And then with Evanston Newsette, with 345 results between 1941 and 1950. And if you go to the pages, and this was with the Evanston Review, one of the hits, December 1954, there was a nice sized column about the YMCA news clubs in pretty good detail. Until you got to the Emerson Street Department, which you see the pull out there. Ted Boyd of the Emerson Y will speak next Thursday, and a Christmas party will be held December 16th. It's pretty cryptic. If you don't know who Ted Boyd was, you would know he's the executive secretary at the time of the Emerson Street YMCA. He's going to speak next Tuesday, but where? Is it at the Emerson Street Branch YMCA, or was it somewhere else? And the Christmas party, is that with the Emerson Y or not? Was it at the Y, or was it somewhere else? But if, judging from the rest of the article, in a lot of detail, what's happening at the McGaw Y, where names, places, the groups, but everything else was cryptic and kind of tucked away in this corner. Most of the searches I saw in the Evanston Review dealing with the YMCA and the Emerson Street YMCA were basically wrapped up in ads. So you had an ad here for join today, the Central Building or the Emerson Street Department. Now, if you're doing some type of research of like race relations in Evanston, you would not know by this ad that if you had membership to Central Y, you can go to the Emerson Street YMCA. But if you only had a membership to Emerson Street Department of YMCA, you could not go to the Central Y. So a lot of these things could be misleading if you're from the outside looking in, trying to do some research like, oh, wow, Evanston had 2 YMCAs, you can go to any one of them. That wasn't the case. Now, in comparison with Evanston Newsette, March 1947, there was a full-page feature. This entire page is pretty much related to the Emerson Street Branch YMCA. And he got into detail, photographs, profiles, scoring, where teams are going to go and play, names, stats, points in the game. And this is just one page of one issue of the Evanston Newsette. And then again, just searching YMCA, and I've heard this a lot in a lot of the oral histories where the Black community here in Evanston had their proms at the Emerson Street YMCA because ETHS proms did not allow mixed proms at the high school. But here it is. We have this and we have names. Who took the photograph, where it was held. In other conversations, I could see who was performing. So this was an important part to have in this research. A close-up of an ad of a basketball game at the Emerson Street YMCA with the Clippers versus the South Chicago YMCA. And in that same issue, just slightly above it, was a article that relates to that ad about who is going to go where, when the game is going to happen, averaging 65 points, stats, things that you need to know, where they're playing, the Clippers, as well as the Bobolinks, and their article for the Bobolinks are right here next to it. And the Clipperettes, which was the Emerson Street YMCA cheerleading team that cheered on the basketball game. A lot of detail that was missed in the Evanston Review. It would have been lost. The history of these papers were lost. And you had no way of accessing it and knowing what was happening in the community. Just so to kind of recap, the important part of having this digitized collection at the Evanston Public Library was extremely helpful. And as soon as Jeff called me and said, hey, it's live, that was a mistake because I spent about 8 hours in the evening doing all kinds of searches and researching and updating and going full speed ahead on updating a new revised second edition of Gatherings that's coming out soon. In addition, the University of Minnesota Libraries, the Cost Family Archives, with their digitized, works very similar in ways, search terms and going through all of these documents in minutes and calling up anything that related to Evanston using similar search terms, Emerson Street YMCA, Evanston, Illinois, of the Colored Works Department collection. Now, to give you an idea, if I had to go to that archive and look through all the archives at the Cost Museum, imagine if you have been to the Evanston Township High School indoor field house. How many of you been in there? How large that is? They have 4 archive spaces that size of archives. So we're talking about floor to ceiling, 40, 50 feet high. You have cranes that will lift you up to the different levels. We were in rooms that had like a plank going in the middle of the room where you could look down because the bookshelves go through the flooring to the next level. So imagine looking through all those boxes trying to find information on the Emerson Street YMCA. When I did the first issue in 2004, I called them up and I said, well, we only have one reference of the Emerson Street branch and it's just a photograph. But now I found hundreds of pages of minutes, reports, and accountings of the Emerson Street YMCA that I can look into now. And so because of that, and later this year, we'll have a new updated edition of gatherings with new information, expanded information, and re-engaging the community. So I had this photograph was one of the evenings that kind of made me cry because I went over to this person's house and she said, oh, I've been holding on to this photograph for the last 7 years, waiting for you to come by, and I kept on forgetting to give it to you. But here, you should have this. It's the earliest known photograph we have of any reaction or any activity at the Emerson Street Branch YMCA. The building opened in 1914, July of 1914. I think this photograph was taken in January or February of 2015. 1915. So, cool. And I found articles of the team, and they're talking about, unfortunately, this photograph is unidentified, but thinking from that article that I have doing a search at the library, I may be able to at least know the names of some of the players on here. So thank you very much.
Do I have to hold it?
You can put it, it's a clip. You can clip it. But closer up here so it's close to enough.
All right, hold on, everybody. All right. Okay, Chris said swallow the mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm bending forward. Those were two tough acts to follow. So I really only have a few things to say about how the research room is using this newspaper database. I don't have a PowerPoint. I brought stuff. I have a 1916 Evanston News Index and some clippings files, which I don't know if anyone has interacted. Maybe a lot of you have. I think a lot of you have been in the research room. Hi. So I've got some clippings files. Newspapers are such a great primary resource for an archivist because they give us a glimpse into an era. And it's this resource, this database, is so great because it's empowering all of us. And I'm really excited about trying to get the high school. We're all trying to get the high school involved in more historical research, and this will be so great for them because, I don't know, maybe they do want to look through newspaper clippings. I enjoy it because it's tactile and you kind of get lost in something besides what you're researching. Yeah.
It's a little higher. Right. You get a little closer than people can hear.
I am supposed to really swallow the
Yeah,
mic. Okay. All right. So I receive research requests by email and by phone from out of state and out of the country. I've gotten requests from states out of state, from California, New Mexico, Utah, around the Midwest. I've gotten international inquiries from France, Japan, Germany, and Luxembourg, believe it or not. But if you come to the research room, if you're a visitor to the research room, we can now use this resource to help you expand your searches, because we have an institutional library card now. So if you don't have your own library card, we can help you with that. Most of the time when visitors come to the research room, when patrons come to the research room, they're usually researching their house. That's the bulk of the questions. And we have city building records, we have maps, we have photographs, and usually I direct people also to newspaper clippings. But now we can do so much more with the newspaper databases, and my colleague Suzanne here had done a deep dive into her own house. And as Jeff had said, there were many socialites in Evanston back in the day, and Suzanne found out a whole bunch of stuff about her previous owners and debutante balls and births and deaths and weddings. And so it was a lot of fun for her, and I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun for you if you came. My other colleague, Janet, also did a deep dive into a much longer involved story that I don't want to go into, but it involved the Huntoon family, which is an old family in Evanston, and its connection to a suffragette. These kinds of things are just, it's so easy and so great to be able to use the newspaper databases. Some of my regular visitors, Michael Kelly, actually comes in. He uses the Newsbank databases a lot, and he comes in. So he's doing like a cross-reference. So he'll come in with an article and then see what else he can find in the archives. So we have people coming in doing genealogical research, you can imagine, historic preservation. Chris uses it a lot. She may have left for the evening. Oh no, she's here. Chris uses the Newsbank database daily for historic preservation inquiries, her housewalk narratives, her exhibits. She's working on a camera exhibit right now. People looking for information about churches, about entertainment venues, local businesses, lots of stuff about restaurants. People are always looking for information about restaurants. I do have a funny story about this gentleman from Luxembourg, and Jeff was mentioning that the quality of the photographs is very poor. And this gentleman from Luxembourg emailed me, and he was looking for a photograph of a woman. And I managed to find it in the database, but the photograph was very poor. So I went to the hard copy, and I was able to take a picture and send it to him. And as my friend Suzanne says, we had a very satisfied customer.
Did you sell him a membership?
From Luxembourg. Actually, I also got a call today from a reporter. I got a call today from a reporter from Evanston Now who wanted to know something about Martin Luther King's visits to Evanston. And I said, you need to look at the Evanston Public Library newspaper database. I said, we might have something here. We probably do in newspaper clippings, but your best bet is to go to the newspaper database at the library, and then if you're not lucky there, you can come here. So anyway, it's a great tool, as I said, and I'm so grateful to Jeff and the Evanston Public Library and all the partners. Using the resources that we have now, the analog resources, the clippings files, either biographical or subject. The interesting thing that I want to point out that Dino mentioned, the clippings files, and Jeff too, the clippings files in and of themselves are biased, right? Because somebody made a decision, some volunteer or a library employee made a decision about what was important. And so that we're bypassing that. Like what's important to you when you're searching is what's important, right? So thanks again to Jeff, and thanks to Dino for participating in this and helping. It was really, really a daunting, arduous task, I know, and I was happy to participate, and it's a great thing, and thank you. And I hope to see all of you in the research room, and we'll set you up or bring your own laptop. By the way, I'm a librarian, so I can also help you do your research online. And thank you.